Good afternoon and welcome to our panel discussion on budget benchmarking for master planned, large scale, and highly amenitized communities. We have gathered a panel of experts to discuss trends in managing this type of community and to share budget information. Because of our scale and the sheer number of communities we manage across North America, 9,000 in total, FirstService Residential is uniquely positioned to leverage annual budget data and provide analysis that can support the boards of our communities, as well as those that FirstService Residential does not manage. We want to help in developing solid strategic budgets and long-term plans to set communities up for success. Boards can compare operating budgets to those in our benchmark report and perhaps uncover areas of overspending or areas that might be underfunded. You can learn more about what should be taken into consideration when making your budgeting plans. So my name is Katie Ward. I'm the president of our West region at FirstService Residential, overseeing approximately 2,500 communities in 6 Western states. I'm excited to be here and serve as the moderator of this panel discussion. And before I introduce our panel and get into the discussion, just a few housekeeping items to keep in mind. If you have any questions throughout, please submit them through the Q&A option on your control panel. We definitely would love to have a Q&A. If for some reason we don't have the opportunity to address all questions, we will be sure to have someone from our local team follow up. Also, there's no need to take notes if you prefer not to, because we will be recording the session and sending it out to all of our attendees. And then lastly, we will be posting a link to our 2025 benchmark report. You may want to bookmark it for future reference. We've received some very positive feedback from both new and seasoned board members that has really been helpful to them. So now I'm going to introduce our panelists. Joining us today are Ted Gammon, Senior Vice President of Lifestyle Services in our East region. Welcome, Ted.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Glad to be here.
Great to have you. We also have Ken Gibson. He's the General Manager of Ladera Ranch, one of our signature master plan communities located in California.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here and just be a part of this group.
Sounds great. Welcome, Ken. Shane Gillespie is the president of our Arizona market, and he's joining us today as well. Welcome, Shane.
Hi, thank you. Excited to be here.
Michelle Kithcart is the director of lifestyle programming in our East region. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Excited to be here. Thank you.
And rounding out our panel is Landy Labady, VP of Community Solutions in our South region, headquartered in Florida.
Thanks, Katie. Pleasure to be here.
All right, so we are going to jump right in, and we're just going to start with some basics. What do we mean by master plan, large scale, and highly amenitized communities? So Shane, why don't you start us off with that one?
Absolutely. Thank you, Katie. And again, welcome, everyone. It's actually really cool to get this group back together, where over the past few years, this group, along with some others in the organization, we would gather and talk about these things exactly. And a common need we identified was the need for benchmarking data and resource. So super excited to have it and talk about it today. When we're talking about master plan communities, what we're referring to are large scale and highly amenitized communities that have really been thoughtfully designed with many aspects of daily life in mind. So from a Community Association Institute CAI definition, there are a few characteristics that commonly define them. So starting with size, generally, we're talking anywhere from 500 to 1,000 or more homes that are usually built in phases across hundreds or even thousands of acres. And highly amenitized means they often have pools, fitness centers, trails, clubhouses, golf courses are often woven in, restaurants, tennis, and of course, the increasingly popular pickleball. And all of this within a built-in environment where people connect, stay active, and just simplify daily living. And it's popular. So this category has continued to outpace the broader housing market. New construction in these communities are really, really strong. So Florida, where Landy's at, they're leading the nation in development, and in Texas too, where Katie's sitting today, standout markets. And then of course, Arizona too, where, we recently partnered with a developer on a new development that at its completion is going to be as large as 100,000 homes. And what we're seeing is that buyers are gravitating to these communities because they just offer more than the typical neighborhood. The social connectivity, the outdoor spaces, and the lifestyle options are just a really big draw for them. And that's really the key point. Residents, they're not just what we're seeing, they're not just purchasing a home and they're buying into that lifestyle. These communities are designed to be more than just four walls and a roof. They provide the access to that recreation, the wellness, opportunities to connect through social clubs, and of course, conveniences like schools and retail. They're often woven into the design as well. And the goal is really to make everything people need a part of their everyday environment. And so that's really the foundation of how we define these communities and why they're growing so quickly. And really one of the most fun and innovative changes, or evolutions, I should say, is what we're seeing center around some of those amenities. And I think Landy has a really, close view of what those are, and probably can do a better job of expanding on what role they play and why they're so important.
Thanks, Shane. And you did a great job of really outlining what that is. For us, what we've learned is that amenities breathe life into our master plan and large scale communities, right? They typically reflect our residents that are living there, whether it's multi-generational or like where Ken is in California, or one of our 55 and better communities, be it at Sun City in Illinois, Sun City in California, Margaritaville is here in Florida or in the Carolinas. It's all about the experience, right? And what we refer to that is the quality of life is turned into resident experience, right? How do we really create and curate what we refer to as resort style living? Really bringing out the community, bringing people out of their homes and into the clubhouse, into the amenity spaces, and really activate and program those and give them a sense of belonging and sense of community to really, really bring everybody together, whether it's all ages, demographics, psychographics, bringing them together and offering a variety of amenity solutions for all age ranges, right? And so being able to offer that wide range of services and solutions is really, really key. And if we do all those things correctly, that should be elevating our home values for our residents. And one of the big key pieces in our master plan benchmarking guide is strengthening community value. And a lot of that ties into the quality of life, the resident engagement, the resident sentiment is really creating a demand for people to want to live in that community because of the lifestyle, because of the amenities, and that increases property value. So a lot of value added by the amenities and the subject matter experts we have here at First Service Residential, but it's not just about the physical footprint, it's also about programming them. And Michelle is one of our experts on how do we program and activate all of these different amenities and all of these different spaces and helping developers plan for the future, as well as our residents and boards, depending on what life cycle stage the community is in. So Michelle, did you want to touch on a little bit about programming and activating?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Landy. And, we just have seen that trend, like you said, of resort style living. Really the last, I would say decade or two, we're seeing it in our homeowner associations, where before, right, you could get these amazing amenities only when you took like these luxurious vacations to these beautiful resorts, right? But now it's everyday living, which is so cool and so unique. And I just love that we're able to create those memories for our residents. And so resident engagement is such an important topic, right? But this is really where that activation comes in. And I know that you said amenities is like the breath of life, but really it's the programming, right? Because the amenities are like the setting, but we've got to activate those amenities and build those connections for the homeowners. And so we do that in a variety of ways through programming. In our benchmark, we highlight quite a few ideas for everybody. If you flip through the benchmark, anything and everything from outdoor concerts to fitness classes to financial planning, wine and cheese. I mean, we've seen a huge upswing in pet programming and pet amenities. Like we could go on and on and on. But at the end of the day, it's how we activate those amenities that really builds that community. So I think that's so important that we drive home because like Shane said earlier, right, you can buy a home anywhere, but you can't buy this lifestyle anywhere. And that's what we're really creating through programming.
That's such a good point, Michelle. It is the combination, right? You have these beautiful amenities, and there's a ton of investment and thought and planning that goes into the physical amenity, but you need that second layer of activation. So you can have a beautiful building, but if you don't have somebody who's putting intense thought into how it will become activated, how we will connect our residents, it can only be half of the puzzle, right? And so your role in making sure we are connecting our residents and activating those amenities is so critically important. And before we continue with our next topic, I do want to also ask Ken, as we are becoming more and more complex, and there's a lot of needs around how we will manage such elaborate facilities. And you have such a unique perspective, Ken, given the age of Ladera Ranch, it being such a highly sought after master plan community in California. What is your perspective on that and how you manage such a complex, mini city essentially?
Yeah, no, thank you, Katie. And I think that there's a theme here as we've heard from the panel, and we're talking about the complexities and certainly the mini city, right? That is brought up a lot. These are not just a common homeowners association, and you really do have to think of them as a mini city that's highly amenitized and very connected. So you kind of have the best of both worlds a lot of times in these communities where you have this large scale kind of city-like scale features, but you also have these neighborhoods that are connected through the programming, through that engagement, through the activation of all these amenities that you see in these large scale master plan communities. And I can't help but think of an example, a recent example that we had. And as I hear about, right, activation and engagement and bringing the community together, we just recently underwent, right, you talk about an aging community, a 25-year-old community, and you're starting to go through refreshes and remodels and replacing very large scale components and assets, playgrounds. And the example is a water park, right? So a complete redo of a water park from top to bottom. I mean, everything was completely updated for this past summer opening summer swim season. And so cool to see it come to life. First, all the planning that goes into that, all the strategic thought process that goes in between the board and staff and just working through this large multi-million-dollar project. But then to really get to the point of we are ready to open, and kind of a cool story where we receive our permit, we're ready to go from the county, okays us. Literally, we send out another key thing of these large scale communities is that communication piece. We send out via social media, hey, the water park is open 2 o'clock today. This message goes out like right around noon. So we've got 2 hours. And 2 hours later, there's a line with 70 people, right, lined up outside the gate, half hour before we even open, ready to go, the excitement, and you just see it. You see people, how excited they are. They've been watching from afar, watching as you've built this, and now you're ready to open it. And it resonated with me, just how important it is and how much the message does get out, and you can reach people, and they're watching, they're keeping a tabs on what's going on, and they're waiting for the word. And so our Instagram post that we put out has like over 40,000 views, and so people were excited, and we've been enjoying it ever since, and people have been loving it, and we've been busier than ever. So it's a great success story, and to see that come to life from start to end is really cool and a neat experience for everybody who was involved.
I love that. Thank you. Couple elements there. Not only the expertise around just kind of the aging community, but how we keep it up to date, cutting edge amenities, because sometimes in a 25-year-old community, those refreshes are going to need to take place. And so how do we make sure that what is happening in a 20 or 25-year-old community is competing with and staying, on track with what maybe the brand new community down the street is offering. So I know you and your team do a lot of work around that. And then I love that you mentioned the communication, because what that demonstrates in that story is that you and your team have set a tone for how we will communicate. And there are many different avenues, right? It might be Instagram, it might be direct, it might be people logging into the website, but that builds over time. And it's almost kind of our residents are getting trained with how they'll receive communication, and they've let us know how they prefer to receive it. So you have to kind of watch that pretty closely. So we're ensuring that how we're communicating matches what our residents prefer. And I think that's really important for our board members to understand, that is something that takes time and takes kind of a listening ear to make sure we're on track with that. So I love that. Super fun. And that water park is amazing. So I do want to talk a little bit more about amenities just in general. So what are we seeing as some of the significant trends that impact our large scale master plan communities? So we'll start with amenities, and I'd love to hear from you a little bit on that, Landy, but then we'll kind of move into some of the other big buckets of key elements that kind of signify a large master, and we'll kind of go through some of those as well. So Landy, let's start with you. What are some of your thoughts around amenities and what we're seeing from a trend perspective?
Sure. I think first, let's take a step back and what makes these master plans really unique, right? And the big factor, and Ken mentioned some great pieces, communication certainly is a big one, and there's a lot of different ones, but I think they all lead into the fact that it's all about experience, right? So these master plan and large scale communities really all revolve around experience. And it's not just about the physical plan or the footprint, which is really important, right? But it's emotional versus transactional in these large communities. It's all about how does this make you feel? And the resident experience drives the narrative versus in other cases where it might be budget driven. Does that make sense? And so that is really what I envision being the most unique piece about master plans. And associate experience plays a big part of that. And we'll talk about staffing and structure in a little bit, but the associates that bring that vision to life along with the amenities is really key as well. So trends that we're seeing a big push in lifestyles. As Michelle said, it's not just the amenity and the physical plant or footprint of the amenity, but how do we activate them, right? We're seeing a lot around food and beverage, a lot of restaurants, bars, pop-ups, taco trucks, and things of that nature. Again, you can have the best restaurant in the world without a great lifestyle team to bring it to life and get people out of their homes, going to these amenities. And once they're there, having a really authentic experience and a great curated event for your residents that match their demographic and psychographic, really important as well. So food and beverage, lots of lifestyle, lots of experiences. We're also seeing a lot around wellness, longevity, and recovery, right? We've all heard of swimming pools and saunas, but it's now not only the cold plunges, but infrared saunas. And what can we do for longevity? And a lot of our communities are now bringing on nutritionists on site, which plays a big role in that. There's a lot around IV and restoration. So we're seeing a lot and a big push towards the recovery and wellness and longevity spaces. We're seeing a lot of outdoor activities, a lot of nature trails. We're seeing a lot of things that are indoors typically being moved outdoors, and a lot of outdoor events being brought inside. So all about experience, really interacting with your neighbors, interacting with people that have like hobbies and like-minded. We're seeing a lot of requests for flex spaces that today may be what we have in Margaritaville, a playground, or in Hillwood in Texas, and tomorrow they may be something different. So having that foresight and that insight of what the trends are and what's here to stay and what's flexible is really key. We're also, as Michelle mentioned, pets, everybody's best friend. So there's a lot around pets. Indoor pet programs, outdoor pet programs. We're seeing dog groomers on sites. We're seeing a lot of really immersive and interactive amenities that are tagged with, again, a lot of programming. And then sports. We can't talk amenities without talking about sports. We mentioned pickleball, paddle's another one that's also picking up steam. But we can't forget about tennis, right? We still have those hardcore tennis players that we need to do it the right way. We need to do tennis at a high level. and those expectations are there. And so our residents, our boards, our developers are highly in tune with what's good, knowing what brands certain things align with in sports, the lighting, the courts that they're made out of. It's not just about creating an amenity to check off a box. It's really surveying your residents or understanding the vision of your board and the vision and brand of your community, or talking with your developers. What exactly are we trying to achieve? And bringing something that's really accretive to the residents, that again, at the end of the day, gets them out of their homes, enjoying these amenities, but also helps raise property values.
Such a good point. And maybe just to build on that a little bit, Ted, if I could turn it over to you, we do hear the kind of phrase and term sense of belonging. When you hear what Landy's describing, and I know in your realm of responsibility, creating that belonging and that attachment to the community is an important part of what you and your teams do. Can you speak to that a little bit and what your take is on that phrase?
Yeah, sure. It ties back to, I think, when we kicked off and Shane said that our residents are really buying more than just a home, right? They're buying a community and they're buying involvement. So we've used the term engagement frequently already today, both from the resident perspective and then later we'll talk from the board and the committee perspective. But what that really means, obviously, is, how involved is a homeowner or how involved is the resident within the community? And all of that ties back to, the programming that we're offering, or do we have a diverse set of programming to include the largest number of people? So Landy mentioned just a second ago, don't overlook tennis, right? So there's a trend of pickleball, which has been trending ever since I joined the company a long time ago. When it first started, now it's almost like crazy, right? Pickleball is all we hear about. But there is still a need. We don't want to overlook the tennis players and the bocce players and the other groups of people who have specific interests within the community. So when it goes to that level of engagement, that's on the programming side. But as it ties into communication, right? Two-way communication from the board to the homeowners is critical to create a sense of harmony and a perception of transparency, right? We hear that term frequently, how much information is being communicated out to our homeowners, and that's vital. When it comes to committees, many of our communities, especially in our large scale and master plan, lean into committees, obviously, because a board, as communities grow in size, the size of the board typically stays the same, which is interesting, right? So if you have a 100 home community, you might have a 5-member board. We could have a 10,000 home community and still might have a 5-member board. So when you look at how big the issue has become, it's important to lean into having people actively engaged to help. And of course, residents moving in have a very diverse level of background in the professional world who can contribute, aids in volunteerism, and also creates people who are potential future board members.
So true. And I love the point you're making, because there's always a lot of talk about pickleball, but it's just a great illustration of the fact that it's part of our role as management and certainly part of a board's role to make sure there's balance. Because I think it's easy to get very focused and spend a lot of time on something that is particularly popular or that we hear a lot about, but making sure there's representation and that there's balance in the community is really a critical part of our role as well. So great point on that, especially.
Hey, Katie, if I could I want to touch on that because I love that you guys mentioned that. I think that is such a critical point, and it's so easy to get caught up in kind of the latest and greatest, and things will come and go, right? But like Landy touched on it, Ted, and then you touched on it. It's some of those little things. So it's looking at what are some other options that we can do. They don't have to be massive things. It can be bocce ball. It can be putting cornhole games out at a facility or at a pool deck or a green space. Here in Ladera, we recently took an old unused artificial turf putting green and turned it into a 9-hole mini golf course that brings in a whole different set of just demographics from the community. We've added disc golf. And so you can do some different things if you have some unique spaces that maybe are passive areas that you can really just activate and bring in different folks from the community, kids, all ages. So really, really key component there, not to be missed.
Point. Such a good point. Okay, I'm going to shift us a little bit to one of our sexier topics, insurance and financials. Okay, and Ken, you and Shane have a lot of experience in this area, just in your roles. And of course, on the insurance front, there has been so much volatility. And it's a big expense when we think about this benchmark report and how we've assessed all of our communities throughout North America. Insurance is something that is a very hot topic. So can you, Ken or Shane, can one of you jump in and talk a little bit about that and what you would want to make sure our board members are considering?
Yeah, sure. Just to start, I would absolutely agree. There's a ton of volatility in the insurance space, and that has increased over the past few years. And some of it's environmental factors, such as, floods or wildfires, but it's something every community is feeling, and we're seeing premiums rise at pace that is often outrunning general inflation. And we're seeing carriers tightening their requirements, which make it more challenging for associations to get the right coverage at the right cost, and sometimes get coverage at all. And if you have a wildfire, even if it's in the same state, those insurance carriers react to that. And it creates a real hard strain for you're going out on your own to try to get these coverages. If you're lucky enough to get it, it's coming at a premium. And that is one of the biggest challenges we see as we're being introduced to new boards and new communities. So one of the things we offer at First Service is we do lean heavily on our finance team and the FFI, which is the First Service Financial and Insurance Program. We have some great partners that are just dedicated to this specifically. They wake up and this is all that they do. And what they do is they provide the leverage and the expertise to help negotiate in the market and to find creative solutions that communities just can't secure on their own. And insurance is really only just part of that financial picture because, parallel, you have communities that are also dealing with interest rate impacts, and whether that's refinancing a clubhouse or taking out a loan for a capital improvement or just managing your reserves, the cost of borrowing has gone up significantly. And that too plays into that partnership that I was referring to, because it's even more important to have those financial partners at the table to weigh in the options to make sure the decisions are sustainable and they're long-term. They're not reactionary. So that's really kind of the big picture. And we are seeing that across multiple states on the insurance side. And of course, the benchmarking, as you said, Katie, it reflects that very well. I think Ken does an incredible job in his community in a lot of ways. But one of the things I would like to hear, Ken, just for me, is share how it plays out in your day-to-day and your community, and how you're guiding the community to make those right decisions and really give them the proactive mindset to stay in front of some of those things and to address some of the causes that increase those premiums. So I'd love to be a student here for a minute and just hear from you on what you're doing at Ladera.
Yeah, no, happy to share. Thank you, Shane. Yeah, there really is, and Shane, you touched on it. You mentioned, fire season, right? We hear it all over the place. We of course also deal with storms, whether it be flood or hurricanes, things like that across the country. And so I think first and foremost, it's setting realistic budgets. It's almost like you kind of have to anticipate some of this stuff. And then there's some work that goes in with that as well, which I'll get into a bit. But as far as like the rising premiums and things like that, there's definitely a trend. And I think to be prepared, I think the prudent thing to do is to increase those budgets quite a bit, right? Not necessarily knowing what your premiums are going to come in at, but just to anticipate that. You'd rather have too much budget in that area than not enough. I've seen it firsthand what that looks like. And it can be a little bit of a shell shock for some communities and difficult. And kind of talking a little bit about, as we think about and how we manage, like fuel modification, brush clearing, things like that. It really is, and this again is one of those, even though it's it's not the fun, amenity activating space, but it is a community effort, and it very much involves homeowners taking care of their space. If you're trying to keep fire hazards and low and risk and mitigate risk, keeping that to a minimum. And so there's so much education out there. And I would say the biggest thing is partner with your local fire authority, because there's so much good education to ensure that both for homeowners, that they know some tips and tricks that they can take care of around their private property. But then on the larger scale, really looking at what can the association do? What can we do as a community? What are some best practices? What are some things that we should be thinking about? Is that going to require us to budget for it, right? Getting in front of it. And so like a big buzzword out here in the West, certainly in California, Southern California, is acacia removal. A plant that builders and developers put in many, many years ago, very common. And today, what we've learned is that fire authority has deemed it to be a hazardous plant when you think about it, the way it grows over time, the woody nature, and then the risks that come with that. And so mass efforts, are underway across many, many associations. And the larger the community, the more of an undertaking this is to how do we go in and replace acacia? How do we budget for that first and foremost? How do we then manage that? What does the communication look like to the residents when they might back up to a slope that, in their point of view, it looks great, right? It's covered, it's slope stability. You have to kind of weigh that, but then you're trying to explain and really communicate the reasons behind it. Why are we removing it? It looks healthy, yes, but and so I think getting out in front of that is so critical. Again, partnering with your local fire authority or your state fire authority to ensure that there's consistent messaging. We've learned certainly time and time again that it's great to have that backup. So when homeowners maybe don't understand or they reach out to fire authority to seek information, there's a consistent message there. And so I think it's just another one of those opportunities to push out really good communication. It's education, do it in a variety of ways. If you have a community website, that's a great place to start, and then frequent e-blasts and things like that, social media, where you can just push it out. And so that way, when you do these large projects, if you're doing some large brush clearing, there's heavy equipment, hopefully it doesn't come as a surprise. Everybody has learned that that's part of the process. That's a multi-year process to mitigate the association's risk.
Thank you, Ken. And so, especially in a community the size of Ladera Ranch, I think the Acacia Project is such a great example. Are there other pieces that you'd want to be sure and share that are specific to capital improvements? I mean, so you're kind of giving an example of something that could be a significant budgetary consideration. And I know capital improvements for a community that age of Ladera Ranch are a big piece of the budget, and I'm sure for many of our listeners today. Any other nuggets on that?
Yeah, I would just add also, thinking about how you budget for that, right? Everybody's familiar. We all know a reserve study. Communities all have our reserve study where we're used to capturing like components, a playground, a pool refinishing. But Acacia, this is a great place to budget for if you have to do major brush clearing. This isn't normal, landscape maintenance, monthly maintenance. This would be a strategic approach to removing and replacing large slopes that are going to require, significant funds over a period of time. So I think one strategy early on is to start to build that into your reserve study, work with your reserve analyst and get that built in and create a multi-year approach to it. And you can tackle each year, you can take a chunk of the high priority areas that need to be addressed, working, partnering with OCFA. So yeah, key element there.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I'm going to build on that a little bit, or at least the financial discussion, by talking about some of the operating budgets that we see. And I know, the financial component is really at the forefront of many of our board members' minds. So like I said earlier, First Service Residential has published the benchmark guide, really for the sole purpose of supporting our boards in developing solid strategic budgets, giving insight. I mean, we're asked many, many times, right? How is our size and scale a benefit to our board members? And so to be able to provide this kind of data and give insights into what's happening in some of your neighboring communities, in communities across North America, it truly is one of the things we get asked most often, and what led to the creation of this report. And really, the internal conversation that was described earlier, as we all gather as experts on this side of the business, and get together and share best practices, ideas, and experiences. So for the benefit of this discussion, I just want to talk about some of the most significant line items in those budgets of our master plan communities. And so let's start with landscaping. Landscaping can account for up to 24% of an annual budget. And, Ken just gave some great examples of how that comes to be oftentimes. But Shane, maybe I'll flip it over to you. And if you could talk a little bit about what can our communities and board members do to manage some of those significant landscaping costs?
Absolutely. And really, I love this because it's one of my favorite subjects, both in my profession, but also in my personal life. I love a green grass, and I love having a green lawn, and having moved from Northern California and leading that Northern California team, and now leading the Arizona team and living in the Arizona desert over the last couple of years, I'm still shocked by how lush some of these landscapes can really be here. And it really highlights the importance of thoughtful design and ongoing investment in landscaping. And it's not just throwing water at it. Because I know I'm not the only one that likes to have a nice lawn, healthy trees surrounding my community. Labor, of course, has increased, and I know we'll get into that, but water costs have gone up everywhere. And we're seeing a notable shift towards that turf replacement and sustainable solutions. So that 24% that you mentioned, Katie, that's rising. So communities are making changes to reduce water use, create long-term savings, whether that's through the smart irrigation, native plants, or redesigning some of our common areas. One of the things I learned coming to Arizona, and there's a lot of desert communities that we manage in Nevada and across the West. And what's unique in the desert is that turf often serves as more than just an aesthetic purpose. In a lot of our communities, it also functions as retention basins. And those things need to be kept up as well. And anyone who's lived through a monsoon or a significant rain here knows just how much damage those storms can create. And Ken, you touched on that a little bit too. But that means repair, replacement, and upgrading to more sustainable designs often come with a heavy cost. And I mentioned the large development being built here in Arizona, and I think that's just a really great example of early planning and onset investing into the community with an infrastructure, with a design that's built to last. A lot of those landscapes can be beautiful, but they need to be environmentally and fiscally responsible. And so we see a lot of that water recapturing and gray water usage that is so prevalent here in the desert. And our role as management, as the managing partner, we work directly with the landscape companies and communities to manage these challenges. That includes, just coordinating with the developments of water resources, those allocations, tracking the landscape changes, and ensuring the communities are staying in compliance while still meeting that resident experience and the demands of those residents, which is just really not an easy task. And it requires a lot of communication, understanding in our communities. And again, the initial design, you don't want a homeowner to come in and buy in and having all of this great stuff and it die and turn into rock walls and granite fills. So really being mindful of that and having really good alternatives as you start to do that turf replacement and ensuring you still keep that initial design and integrity of the landscape. And so while landscaping is really one of the largest expenses in the community budget, the challenge and opportunity just, I think, lie in the balancing the sustainability, the water conservation, and the infrastructures that come with living in the desert or living anywhere for that matter. Because even in California or in the Midwest, water and the conservation of water is such an important topic. And there are some really cool things to do around that. And it's different in each climate and in each community. But being mindful that that spend up front also can have pay dividends on the backside too. So if you're planting well, if you put those, you cut back in the right areas, it can really save the association in the long term. So having that short term, but also the long term vision of what the community needs.
Such a good point. Thank you. Thank you, Shane. Also, Landy, I wanted to ask you your thoughts because another budget driver can't, especially in these highly amenitized communities where there's lots of services on site, staffing and those who serve the residents can be a big part of the budget too. In some instances, it can be up to 19–20%. And so what are some of your thoughts on that and the expense that comes along with that and the importance of it?
Yeah, Katie, I mentioned it earlier how important it is for our associates to deliver that service that we keep talking about, right? But I have to pause for a second. It's so impressive, the scale and the value of resources that are all in this benchmark guide, right? From the value of our properties to the amenity revolution we've discussed, and now budgeting, and now the crown jewel, our staff and our associates. Just so impressive to have all of that data and detail with all of these great resources in one benchmark guide. And you know, it's incredible that FirstService Residential can put this all together. I'm very passionate, and so is everybody on the panel today about this area. So really enjoying to be able to dive into all these different areas. And there's just so much detail in each space, right? But when you think about these master plan communities, it's in our name, service, right? You need a dynamic team with deep hospitality roots to really execute on this. And that starts with the structure of the organization. And having the right structure on site, on property is so critical. I'd say the next piece is not only finding the talent, but the talent that has a personality of the community, of the developer, of the residents. A lot of the staff or a lot of the leadership has the know-how, the experience, but not everybody will have the personality for every community, right? It's just nature, human nature. And so being able to not only find the high caliber talent, but also having people that have the right true north and the right moral compass and the personality, it's not an easy feat. And one of the advantages that FirstService Residential has is we've got a broad base, you know, multiple states and a lot of experts in different areas that really grow and have career pathing throughout our entire organization. And we're able to really pull on that deep bench that we have of resources and of staff and of leadership to really find the right teams to lead the right projects and lead the right communities and associations. It's very complex, and these communities operate so differently, right? If you have food and beverage, you're receiving thousands of invoices a week, right? So we have experts in finances and accounting to really understand what that volume of invoices means. Human resources plays a huge role in these communities, right? What does talent acquisition look like? You're constantly recruiting. If you have golf and restaurants and all of these different roles, you know, students are going back to school now, and how do we continue that daily life and that service and executing that great service? And for our residents, keeping it life simplified, right? So there's a lot of different components and a lot of different expertise that's needed. And for us, we like to refer to it, and it's referred to in the benchmark guide, the power of retention. It's really taking our staff and our associates and putting them at center stage and giving them the tools and the resources to really drive excellence to our communities and to our residents to deliver that each and every day.
Yeah, to your point, it is an expense, but and therefore the value needs to be there. And that is always at the forefront of our mind. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to just cover one more topic and then open up the discussion for some of the questions we've gotten into the chat. But with all the discussion around expense, I would love to just cover briefly some revenue generating strategies. And Ted, I know you've got experience in this area, as does Michelle. Can you maybe, the two of you, speak to some of the creative ways communities are generating revenue in an attempt to kind of neutralize or offset some of these rising costs?
Sure. Talk about a hot topic, right? Just about everywhere we go, our clients are asking us for our guidance, advice, expertise, ideas. And actually, this can kind of be a fun part of what we do, right? Getting creative on how we can leverage our large scale communities. And what's great about it is, because of the size of the community that we're talking about, there's opportunity for volume as we approach different aspects of how we generate additional revenue. So kind of break it into two sections. There's the part of it that is really property based, and then there's like a corporate based side of this. So I would encourage our listeners today to check your documents before you just take some of these ideas and run with them to ensure that it's appropriate for your community. But on the property based, things like facility rentals, so a ballroom that might be rented out for a specific event, guest fees, perhaps, generating if a guest pool pass or a parking pass, on-site events, which Michelle's going to talk more about in a moment, community branded merchandise. We're beginning to see traction. People are very proud of their community. There are online stores that can kind of create everything with the community branding, and residents or guests can buy those things. I've seen, golf bags with logos on it, which is really, really cool. Kind of self-sufficient vending at properties is another way to generate some revenue. Leveraging technology. So it's not really generating revenue, but more of a cost savings. An example might be leveraging new and available technology at a front gate, for example, rather than having a full-time person. Is there technology available with plate readers and things of that nature? Many of our communities are exploring that. But what's most exciting, in my opinion, is really on the corporate based or partnering with local businesses, right? So, advertising, huge opportunities in our large scale communities and community newsletters, for example. We even have some associations where they have full-time staff dedicated to driving advertising within our monthly newsletter. Signage, for example, companies will be willing to pay for sign space either in a clubhouse, a common area, or we even see them a lot of times at our pickleball, tennis, or baseball fields, where they'll be putting a sign up in the outfield. Preferred vendors, where we can, many communities have service vendors that frequently come in and would be willing to pay for space in a vendor guide as a preferred vendor. Cell tower leasing is something we're beginning to see. Solar leasing, again, where a company might come in and lease a space, an available space from the association, and be willing to pay for that. But one of the things I think we're most excited about as an organization is what we're calling our connectivity program, where we have worked with local cable and internet companies to provide bulk internet or cable services to our residents at a substantial savings to the resident below retail rate. But what's most exciting is that we'll pay actually a door fee to the association for that either marketing agreement or bulk service agreement. And in large communities, that can be in the many hundreds of thousands of dollars of additional revenue that can go right into the operating budget. And Michelle, I think Michelle had a couple of points on the programming side.
Yes, thank you, Ted. You did a phenomenal job, right? What we want to do is diversify, right? How we can get those revenue streams. So having a couple different ideas is the way we want to go inside of our communities to help offset those costs. So I think just one area really, Ted, that I could add to everything that you said was on the programming side when it comes to sponsorships. So we know we have a lot of residents, they want to engage in all of these events, but how do we keep the cost of these events lower without having to pull into the operating budget, things like that. So we have seen such an uptick in sponsorship opportunities inside of our communities. Obviously, we are being strategic on who we partner with and who we bring into the communities. So obviously it needs to align with residents' interests and things like that. It's got to make sense, right? It's got to be a win-win for both parties, our residents and of course our sponsors that are coming in. But man, in some of our master plan communities, they're raising, over $100,000 to help offset their costs of their programming. So sponsorships is such a key part on the programming side to help offset those costs. So, we lowered I'm going to say the barrier of entry for programming, right? For events, we're lowering that cost so we can appeal to more people. So really, Ted, you did a phenomenal job. That was really the only thing I could add. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, guys. Wow. Great information. So I'm going to try and cover some of the questions that have come in through the chat. And we've gotten some really good questions. And what I'm going to do is start with you, Landy, because we've had several that are sort of amenity / food and beverage related. So I'll try to batch a couple together just for efficiency's sake, because they're related to one another. So first question was food and beverage, considered an amenity, but can be expensive and is sometimes operating at a loss in some of our communities. So how do we best explain that to the homeowners? How do we get people behind that? And then maybe kind of related but nuanced is lifestyle wellness programs, especially with cost of living going up, and they can be expensive to maintain as an amenity. And so what are our options around that? And then lastly, maybe as a bonus topic on this, aging amenities. So in this instance, there's a lodge. It was built in 1972 when, membership was at 1,400 members versus today's 5,000. So how do we right size, in this case, that lodge, but amenities in general to deal with the fact that they've become more popular, people are spending more time at home, and they need to accommodate a greater membership base than maybe they have in the past. So I don't know if that was too much to pack in. Do your best. But I thought they all kind of, were related to one another.
Yeah, and I've got 30 seconds right now.
Yes,
Well, I'll do my best, and I'll ask Michelle's help to help me on the back end questions. But I think starting with the last topic I touched on is staff. Very expensive, obviously. We want to make sure that we have the best staff in each market, and so that comes at a cost. A lot of the things we've discussed today come at a cost, and so being able to transparently communicate that and in a digestible way to not only the board, but the residents to really explain what is our vision and planning out what a 3, 5, 10-year vision looks like and mapping that out with all of your expenses. Like Shane and Ken said, not only is it landscaping, irrigation, but there's a whole plan that needs to go on, really take place to really look at it holistically. Once you have that plan in place, a lot of the amenities are a piece of that puzzle, right? Restaurants, while yes, they are expensive, you've got consumables and commodities and labor, all of which have gone up 30 to 40% over the last few years, right? Food has a shelf life, but what is it doing to your property value? What is it doing to your resident experience? What's it doing to the quality of life? What's it doing to the reputation of your community in your area, right? That should all be driving your home values, right? In the positive direction. And so that's the way we should be looking at it. It's how are we reinvesting in our community to stay relevant through the life cycle of our communities, whether that's the restaurant, right? That's a high cost item, and we know that. Whether it's amenities, you mentioned some of our latest technology and the trends that we're seeing with cold plunge and longevity. When you have thousands of homes, you have a little bit more leverage because that cost is split up amongst a large amount of homes. So it's not that detrimental per unit or per home, but it's still expensive. And so finding alternatives, so again, surveying your residents, asking what they're seeing, what they would like to see is something that we love to do at First Service Residential. Basing our decisions on data and our recommendations on data is what we love to do. And being able to say to the board and the residents, this is what your residents are seeing. This is what we're seeing as the largest organization in this space, right? And these are the trends. We would recommend A, B, and C. And so it's not always about cost, but I had mentioned it earlier, it's driving the narrative on resident experience versus a budget narrative, right? And so finding the nice blend of what matches your community to all that and being able to, make as many of the residents feel that they're part of that decision-making process, and certainly the board along the way. But Michelle, I'd love to lean on you on how we're doing that, on different life cycles on some of our communities that, are 20, 30 years old, and they still want to stay competitive with that new master plan being built down the street.
Yes, so absolutely. I wanted just to add to something that you said because it clicked in my brain when we were talking about food and beverage and how, keep those costs low. What we see at our most successful communities is a partnership between programming and F&B, right? So when we're activating that space, right? Maybe we bring in trivia night, maybe we bring in karaoke, coming night inside the restaurant. So we're driving food sales, we're driving beverage sales, right? So we're helping the restaurant through programming, perhaps break even or even maybe make a little money. So I just wanted to add that into what you said there. And then as far as like the life cycle, so this is a great problem to have in my mind. I'm like, yes, there's so much engagement that we need more amenities or bigger and better amenities, right? So what we've seen to kind of get around that barrier until we can plan for the future and be able to save the money that's needed to do a refurbish, to do a, kind of an upgrade there and really bring in maybe some more flexible spaces is we've just seen a repeat in some programming, right? So say we have a ballroom that can only hold 200 people, but we have the need for 300 or 400 people, right? So it's taking that event and maybe replicating it the next night. So a Friday night, we have an event, we have it again on Saturday, right? To really fulfill that need for all of the residents. So again, it's just being creative. What can we do with what we have? How can we satisfy the need in the market or in the community?
Great point. Great point. Thanks, guys. One additional question we received that I'm going to kick over to you, Shane, because I think it's a great one. And so the question is, aside from the local team, the manager, the general manager, what assistance should a board expect from First Service, kind of regionally or on behalf of the company, on topics like insurance premium negotiations, vendor referrals for bulk arrangements that came up with cable internet, investments, reserve studies, things like that. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. So I love that question because we want you to love your local team, your dedicated team, but we also want you to love First Service and the organization that's made up of people beyond just them. Your general manager, we think of them as that tip of the spear, the conduit between you and the broader organization, where we do offer some scalability and economy of scale, where our buying power allows us to get better than market rates on your return. So on the investment side, we do leverage not just the couple of $1 million that you have in your reserves, but when you think about the billions of dollars that are invested across the associations that we manage, that is a lot of buying power that the banks look at us as the customer. So it allows us to negotiate a better rate for these communities for their betterment. The other part too is just our local teams are supported by our regional directors, our vice presidents, all the way up through you, Katie. And our job is really to train and develop and create a culture that they can thrive in, because we know that one of the biggest causes of instability is manager turnover, team turnover. And so we do our best to create a culture and an environment where they can thrive and support those local communities in a really great way. But there's a lot of things that we like to consider wrapping our arms around for these local teams. And the introductions aren't just there too. So as we're working on the investment side, you get to meet that vice president in FFI and talk about what's going on in the market. So you're tapped into experts across the entire company to help you better, not just make decisions, but to understand what those decisions are and what the available options are for your community.
Thank you, Shane. Perfectly timed, because we are at time, and I'm going to make sure and keep us on time as such. So I just want to say a big thank you to our panelists. Well done, team. And a bigger thank you to our audience members, our board members, our fellow associates who joined today. I hope you found the information helpful. Please be sure to download the benchmark report. It's in the link for more information. Landy said it, data is king, and where we can provide great data and information to our board members to help you make better informed decisions, we see that as part of our role. And we hope that you use it as you start to plan for your community, set your 26 budget, and plan for the years beyond. And you can always reach out to us to your First Service residential local teams, any of us that joined the panel here today with any questions or for further guidance. So please don't hesitate to do that either. Thank you all so much for joining us, and please enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.